Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. The first item up is roll call.
Alderman Arnold.
Here.
Alderman Bamman.
Here.
Alderman Coleman.
Here.
Alderman Headley.
Here.
Alderman Totten. Here. Alderman West. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item number 3 is invocation by Wayne Geiger of First Baptist Church of Green Valley, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Alderman Yolanda West.
Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us. We recognize that this is the day that you've made, and we will be glad and rejoice in it. We thank you for the many good gifts that you've given us. We pray for those who are going through difficult times. Pray for healing and for comfort. Pray that you would meet every single need. We thank you for this great city. We thank you that our kids are off to another great start this year. We pray for protection. We pray for those who stand in the gap. And Lord, we just pray for wisdom and insight tonight in this meeting. Be with our leaders and those who guide us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to the next item, approval of agenda.
Yes, sir. Actually, we have one item that we need to add under new business, and that will follow the rental property inspection discussion. It's going to be discussion of waiving the fireworks and the beer sales requirements on city property. It's going to be by Mr. Harrington on behalf of the Fair Board. Okay.
So can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. And moving on to proclamations, we have none. And then moving down to citizen participation. Citizens are asked to please limit their comments to 2 minutes. Is there anybody that would like to come up and address the board? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Moving on to previous business. E.E. Kirby Road Extension. Ryan, the board had come to you and asked for additional information. Do you have that for us?
Absolutely. I'm going to hand out a map of the area along with the cost estimate. As you all recall, several weeks ago, maybe several months ago actually, board members dedicated an interest in at least seeing what the cost estimates would be to extend Kirby Road Phase 3 up through Butterfly Trail through the park.
Hey, buddy.
So, I'll kind of just kick it off here quickly. As you can see, the estimates that Mr. Arroyo came up with, Rick, you have a copy of the map as well, indicates that it would be about $627,000 to complete the roadway from East Kirby, or E.E. Kirby, up to Artie Mize Road. Rick, did you have any, this is just a standard new construction road. The culvert in place down there is suitable to handle the roadway, but I think I'll let you just talk about the construction of it for a moment.
Basically what you have here, back in 2009, we had done a preliminary design for what's called Kirby Phase 3. And so it was about 75% complete in design at that point. That was kind of at the same time all the downtown projects were being looked at. So this cost estimate is based off of that information. And so essentially what these are just updated costs for the current prices that we've seen for these items, or most of these items in particular. And basically the crossing there is set up for the Kirby Road as it was designed in that preliminary design. Essentially, this is, there's really no right-of-way, there's no driveway, so this is essentially just putting in a road. This does not have any, other than storm lines, there's no sewer and there's no water attached to this type of a project. So essentially, it's just going through existing right-of-way and placing a new road base, subgrade, base asphalt, surface asphalt, curb and gutter system.
And, that's going through where the walking trail is, right?
The way, yeah, this doesn't actually show it, but it does cross right before. There's that little circular deal that's kind of down there, just north of where Kirby is in the intersection of 40. And so it crosses, it kind of does a little bit of a loop around that culvert, and it does go parallel to the west trail, but it does cross the trail at 2 points.
Okay.
Alderman Totten, I think that actually Shannon had some discussions initially with the park board regarding the intersection of it with, if you want to.
Yeah, we had a park board meeting it would have been August 1st, a couple of weeks ago. And this was a topic of discussion among the park board. Obviously, the park board's very interested and involved with the care and custody of our parks. And there was concern on behalf of the park board with a roadway dissecting the trail at 2 separate points. Obviously, the recreational integrity of having vehicular traffic cut over those trails is of concern. Currently, the Butterfly Trail is one of few trails other than what we have here in Armstrong Park where trail users don't have to worry about vehicular traffic in crossing streets or walking parallel to streets like on sidewalks and things of that nature. Obviously, the safety of our trail users on those trails is of concern as well. To completely make a circuit around that trail, they would, in essence, have to cross over this proposed road twice. So the park board wanted to make sure that if this was a discussion at the Board of Aldermen meeting, that they had made sure that I communicated to you all that the park board does oppose this project. Yes.
Okay, how much effect is this going with our honoring of our military?
Probably none. However, this is my personal opinion, until the city sells the part of that project that is not parkland, we should let a future developer decide whether they want a street through there or not, since we have one about a quarter of a mile to the east that goes up to R.D. Mize.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost of putting this in is sort of questionable at this time. We'd rather a developer decide whether they want a street there or not.
Right.
I would bring up one more concern. Chief, maybe you can talk to this, but the other concern is even crossing 40 there, it brings to another issue, just like we have down the road. Help me out with the Snybar. You know, we have those accidents and always having those issues there. Wouldn't we have the same issue going there unless we have a light? And so that means we'd have to put in additional funds to have a light there as well. And that's if, does MoDOT get involved in that?
Yeah, since it's a U.S. highway, it would have to be warranted.
Yes, I would think a light there, that would be you have to have a light, that would be a hazardous intersection.
Now, is that going to interfere with the airport?
Probably not specifically right there, although I can say it's never been part of the discussion. I know when we had the child that was hit down in that area, I think there was some discussion about a traffic light or a crosswalk signal or something like that. And at that time, I don't think MoDOT indicated that there was any issue, although they do have a crosswind runway that that would be in the flight path. So one of the other things that we talked about too was the public safety access. Once we lost the access on long drive, vehicles having to go around. I've driven this thing every which possible way that I could, and it looks like the biggest impact to emergency vehicle traffic is it's approximately, this is based off of averages after driving it several times, but the cut from 40 Highway up to Artie Mize through the middle of the park, if you were able to assume the same speed limit, it saves about 38 seconds as based off going down to Owida Drive and then up to Artie Mize. So there's not really a significant savings in time based off of $627,000 worth of infrastructure. So that is one of the considerations. Also, obviously, there's an increase. You see, just while I was out there today, I saw kids riding around the trail with their parents, bicycles with training wheels on them.
Yep.
You add a whole nother level.
Strollers, because I know several with strollers that go over there.
Yeah. So you have an additional, public safety concern there. If you have children riding on it, you get basically two different spots where they have to stop, look both ways, and cross traffic.
Outside all the safety stuff mentioned, at one point we talked about this being, there was a developer came in and proposed a couple ideas. If this was like $100,000 endeavor and we did some sort of cost share to help do this and complete it, that'd be one thing. But for this kind of money, I'd rather spend that money in the original part of town, finish that kind of stuff out. And if that was just laying around, I don't think that's where we should spend our money. But
I agree.
Is this something that we can just put to rest at this point in time then, or how's everybody feel?
I don't think it should go completely away because it was something that was promised to those people that live over there in that area for an easier access to the south part of our town. So I don't think it should go away. I think having an access road through there, yes, it does cause a hindrance with those trails, but you'll have trails if people don't want to go across the road, they'll be able to make a loop on one side or the other without having to cross the road. I'm sure there'll be trails on either side of the road to allow that. The other thing I thought is with the military program there with the Army or military, it would allow easier access to it. And now you're a long ways from anywhere being able to get to that. And a small parking lot could be put in there to allow them to do that. Now, cost is a lot higher than what I anticipated it to be, but I still think it is a viable product to have across there for the people in that area.
Well,
Ken, about the railroad specifically.
is it an action item then to vote on?
Well, let me just ask this question, Ken, if you would please. On the map, if you were to come out and take a left on the 40 instead of going across, and then made access to Northwest Long Street right there where it curved, is that something that could be a possibility or no?
Keep in mind, we actually kind of looked at that several years back. There is no culvert there currently. So I think when we looked at the cost, and I didn't bring that with me, but it was like a $350,000 culvert to build. That's essentially what would be required to cross that, which is similar to the one that's currently there. So just for that culvert without the road, it was pretty expensive crossing.
But that could be, it still sounds like it might be less money to do that, even though.
It's another option.
And then it would keep us from having to go through those trails.
I think we'll review the history on that too. When we moved Kirby to come straight out, the state required us to take that access off because they didn't want a staggered intersection. And that's why the design was, and with the bridge that was put in there between the lakes, was put in there with the intent for Kirby to go straight across and go up to the already demised. And that's why that, because that used to be Kirby over there where Valley Woods Drive is, that used to be Kirby. And when we took that road out, you can see where Yenny used to come out there on the 40 highway. And it was a dangerous intersection with the angle, the way that road came out. So that's why we straightened it out and brought it to the 40 highway. And the state didn't want that staggered intersection like that. So that's why the plans were made for us to have a road that goes up through there. Now, at the time we made those plans, the Butterfly Trail wasn't part of the original plan there. It was afterwards when that land was recognized and given to the park for trails there. But I know there are people over in that area, while it's not my ward, that have asked me why that road hasn't been put in. Money was the issue, which still is the issue.
Well, I think that money becomes a big issue, but I also think safety is another bigger issue. And I don't know, is this something we can take a vote for tonight, or do we want to, how do we want to approach it?
Before we even go there, Shannon, is there any constraints on the grant funding you got to do the trails, to even say we're going to cut a road through the middle of those trails?
Yeah, we do have land water conservation funds wrapped up into the Butterfly Trail. However, it was after the discussion of the road extending up to Artie Mize Road. So when we applied for that grant funding, we let the state know in advance that there was a possibility that a road would eventually come all the way through there and connect to Artie Mize. So we laid it out just in case that were to occur, we don't get in crossways with the state and the conservation department and those grant dollars.
I think it can just be tabled this time and sent to planning and zoning for future consideration.
Everybody okay with that?
Fine.
Okay. Thank you.
We don't have a lot of money.
Okay, moving on to the next item, new business, rental property inspection discussion. Ryan?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Coleman and members of the board. This is another item that we're kind of coming back to. It's new business because we were asked to do some research and bring it back to the board. And this relates to having a rental program for landlords and tenants, or actually landlords, to register their rental property within the city of Green Valley. One of the questions was, would it be more efficient for the tenants, safer, provide better quality of rental housing if the city was engaged in the registration and review, some sort of annual inspection program to go along with multifamily housing. So to that end, I'm going to let Mr. Murphy, which he did the research on the project, let him talk about it.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the map, but in eastern Jackson County, really the only city that has implemented anything is Independence, and they have it had just started within the last couple of months. It's called Rental Ready, and basically anybody that has rental property has to get it registered, and then the idea is I think every couple of years they'll within a couple of years they'll make their way through all the houses the first time, and then when a vacancy occurs, before a new tenant comes in, they have to get approval again. That's a fairly large department to take that on, and they've basically given it to a person just to let him run with it. But other than that, the rest of our neighbors have not done it. There's been discussion here and there over the last 5 or so years, but nobody's gone forward with anything. And a lot of it has to do with just the administrative side of it. I mean, it'd be a fairly expensive venture if you were to send people out and start doing those inspections, because it's not something that could be rolled into our existing staff. On the Kansas side, quite a few of the smaller communities do have landlord licensing, and in talking to Mission in particular, one of the reasons they've done that is unlike us, where we have water billing, where we can know whether it's an owner or a renter. They don't have that utility. Everything's through Johnson County Water One, and the same thing with stormwater. So the city itself really had no idea. They were having trouble tracking down owners of property. You know, if there was a violation or something, obviously the renter's there, but tracking down the owners was more difficult. So that's one thing that Mission's using it for, is just to know who the owners are. We don't really have that problem to the degree that they did. But in talking to them, they also said that they aren't touching the actual interior inspections of single family. And staffing was a big reason why, but the only thing they're doing with it is outside. And they do have more apartments, and that's where they are. I think they try to do, I think it was every 3 years they'll cycle through all the units. But, you know, like I said, on the Kansas side, the smaller cities like the Roland Park, Merriam, Mission, they are doing it. Overland Park has just recently started trying to, they just came up with a program and just started in July, so they're too new into it to really have any kind of good information. And it's kind of the same way we've run into with Independence. I mean, they're a couple months into thousands of rental properties, so it's kind of up in the air. But yeah, staffing costs were a big, I guess, reason why a lot of people sounded like weren't going with it. But we do have some advantages because we do know who the owners of property are. And like when we have a big violation, you know, a lot of times we'll send it to the, not only the tenant, but the owner of the property. So we're kind of already tackling a lot of what those other cities were doing.
Do you have a situation where if there is a tenant living in a home and there's major problems, can they call the city?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I completely spaced on that. So yeah, just currently the way everything is today, say you're renting a house and you think there's a life safety concern, you can call us, and our building official, that's all the approval or say-so we need. He can go in and identify those problems, and if it is something that is a true life safety issue, you know, if it's something that could be corrected easily, that's one thing, but if it's something where you shouldn't even be in there, I mean, they can mark it as unsafe, and until, you know, the owner has to go in and make those repairs to bring it up to speed, and that's in the current code.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no, that wouldn't be adding anything.
No, that's why I did that today.
An example of that, when shortly after I started at the city, probably I started in 2009, it's probably about 2010, I served for a short period as the building official, and we had some of the townhouses that are up over off of Bar Road, and we had a tenant that called, and they were concerned because they had mold on the walls where it had gotten wet. So I went in the following day, did inspections. We found out that there was, the siding was rotted, and we weren't exactly what type of mold it was, but we knew that it was obviously hazardous just from the amount of it in there. We contacted the owner of the property, told them that the space was going to be deemed uninhabitable if they didn't get to it right away, and they relocated the tenant into a different unit while they went in, tore all of that out. So there's other situations where you may have electrical issues, that sort of thing. I mean, the city has a lot of leverage in that situation with the landlord to say, hey, you need to get in here and fix this, you know, immediately. This isn't something that goes on next month's list.
Okay.
And that all follows the UBC, the building code that we have. We've got residential, we've got commercial construction, and then we've also got property, like a rental property management code that we've adopted.
Well, how do the people that are renting get this information? Do we have that to where they would know?
I mean, anybody that would call City Hall.
Yeah, I mean, generally, good or bad, whenever there's a problem, City Hall is one of the first calls. So, I mean, I think that most people just would know to call. I don't know that there's anything specific that says if you're experiencing this problem, call the city.
That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we could add, yeah.
Put in a city view or something like that.
What, Ken, based on the information you gather from other cities, this, I would assume, to register these apartments comes with another tax or fee. What kind of taxes or fees are you seeing?
Yeah, so for the single family, they ranged anywhere from like $60 to $90 a year for the licensing fee. The multifamily was, and I didn't see what this would actually work out to, but for instance, like Roland Park was 4 cents per square foot for anything other than single family. Merriam was 8 cents a square foot with an $85 minimum. So a lot of them were just kind of going off size. So you didn't know exactly what the fee was until you came up with that. Independence actually looks like they go off of, you can do it online, but it's based off of the expected rent for the property. So their fee is tied to rent. And one thing I don't know is how they would make sure that that's actually what somebody is renting for. But
Independence is probably going to get sued over the fee too, I believe.
Yeah, and like
for a violation of the Hancock Amendment.
And that's one of those things. It's so new that
This is new stuff that it would not surprise me if they get sued over the fee, because with the Hancock Amendment, that means you cannot have, the city cannot impose certain fees that are considered taxes without a public vote. And there are some other cities, for example, Kansas City a few years ago tried to impose an inspection fee for some fire issues, and that fee got struck down for a violation of the Hancock Amendment, where they said that was really a tax, it was a disguised tax, and not a user fee, which is permitted. So I would anticipate, because I think this is Independence is real new, isn't it?
Yeah, it was either June or July it started.
Yeah, I mean, so it would not surprise me if there's litigation over whether it's even allowed under the circumstances that Independence has done it.
My concern, I mean, I like understanding or knowing that, we have property owned by certain people that aren't necessarily living here, and if we can control that through the water billing process in some form or fashion, that's one thing, but to impose yet another fee on, the landlords, the builders, the contractors, everything else, that, I don't know, that opens the door, and now you gotta have other staffing and everything else. I would be, then we're gonna, turn around and beat Ryan up for another 1 or 2 head counts, or.
Yeah, and from a Hancock Amendment standpoint, the issue is just the fee. It's not whether you can do it or not, it's whether you can charge the landlord a fee for doing it, where the city, could hire 2 more building inspectors and go out and do more inspections.
And I was one that probably brought this to discussion, because in the past, it's been really difficult to determine what a percentage of our property is rental property, because it doesn't only duplexes and fourplexes and apartments. We have a lot of single-family homes that are rented out there, and staff hasn't been able to present it with a good number in the past. Having a standalone database of what property is owned by landlords and has to be maintained on an annual basis by the landlord registering that property with us is something that would give us a great asset of information to be able to deal with property when it becomes a problem. The inspections was a totally separate conversation that come along after the fact, when I'd read that Independence was starting that up there. Kansas City is in the process of going back to it again. There's an article in the Kansas City Star where they're looking at doing that. They're planning on possibly trying to put it on their ballot in November to cover fees, to cover the price of the inspections and stuff. And it's all in an effort to the Independence in Kansas City to take care of the deadbeat landlords. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on the ones that are good owners out there and take care of the property, but sometimes you have to have things that you have the ability to deal with the ones that don't. And if a tenant calls in and complains about a particular issue at a residence, they may get it fixed and so forth, but that's not to say down the line the landlord doesn't retaliate with higher rent or even eviction because of the issue. And that's where the inspection comes in, to help protect the people that are the lower incomes, people that don't have anything else or any other way to try and get the situation that they're in rectified, so they don't have to live in a dwelling that really shouldn't maybe be occupied, or at least some work needs to be done on to make it, a safer or, healthier environment there. I'm not as concerned about the inspection issue, because I know on the other side that that's a private domicile, and there are all kinds of rules when you go to enter somebody's home. I know police can't enter your home without your permission or strong probable cause and a search warrant, and it'd be probably about the same way for the building inspectors. So about the only time we'd be able to do any inspections on them is during times of change of tenants, and we could make sure that at least it's going to be right for the new tenant going in, and those would be hopefully limited in the number of cases there rather than an annual inspection. But I know Kansas City has the registration for rental property in the city, so that they have that database, and they don't charge for that registration. They do fine significantly if the landlords do not register though, which it's just kind of a, get in here, be honest with us, tell us what you own, what you're renting out here. If you don't, then there's going to be a consequence. And that's the one I'm more interested in, so that we have the database of, and a good knowledge of how much of our community is rental property. That's the direction I would like to see it go, is that we get that database of what property in our community is rental property. And then it makes it easier for us to maybe do long-range planning.
Do we not have something in place already for that?
Well, I mean, Kathy and...
We've got some that are marked, landlords or rentals, and with comment codes, you could run some reports out of the utility billing that have comments for landlords, and who would own what.
Can't we get that information out of the tax rolls through Jackson County?
And you can't, so the way if you go to
Jackson County's website, for each parcel, they list the situs, the owner, like that property, the owner, and then where their mailing address would be. So say somebody lived on 500 Long Street, Joe Smith owns 500 Long Street, but then the address that's associated with him is in California or something like that. So that would be a way to know that it's not him that's actually living there. That would be a rental.
If it's an owner occupied, it would be Joe
Smith, 500 Long Street, and his contact address would be 500 Long Street. You'd have to see how you can, if there's an easy or not so easy way to pull that data out. And then that stuff, I think, is updated every month, or we get new files every month from Jackson County.
The other one is the number of single-family dwellings out there that there's an owner, but there's nothing that lets anybody know that they're renting in at times. And I know some areas and some subdivisions have covenants that don't allow rental property, but it still occurs because it's difficult for people to know whether somebody actually is renting or not. But I think having our own database and having that contact with the landlords, and then it gives us the ability that if something in our codes change, or there's an overall issue going on in the community, that it gives us the ability to let them all know by having a database that we can manipulate, work with, and do what we need to with it, rather than someone sitting and looking at every piece of property in the town trying to find out who the owner is. And the only other time when we really do that is when there's an issue with the property and you have to try and make contact with the landlord. And I know Jackson County tries to keep their stuff up to date, but I'm sure at times it's a little bit behind.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at what we have in Encode right now and see what that list looks like. It constantly have to be updated, and a lot of it would be people letting us know.
You do, I apologize if you just said this, can you do a utility audit to see?
Yeah, so sorry, when I say Encode, that is our utility billing software.
Why don't we go ahead and see if we can do some kind of an audit and kind of pull some numbers together and bring it back at a later time, and
Okay.
We'll see where we go from there.
Will do.
Is that okay with everyone?
I actually read that same article, and they have something that's similar to registering your business, $25 charge. And they also had a $25 charge for their rental units. So, I mean, it wasn't a penalty, it was doing business in the city. I mean,
Landlords pay a license, get a business license and a lot of stuff.
right. And Lee Summit is another city that obviously there is a problem, because all the cities around us now are looking into something with regards to monitoring what's going on in these rental properties and making sure that they are livable.
It's kind of an underground business, because people buy multiple pieces of property and run that from either here or from somewhere else in the world. And it's, you know, every other business up and down our streets here have to buy a business license. They have to have annual safety inspection from the fire department and the city. And the rental property goes unchecked, and you know, it's just a business that's kind of under the scope. And I think that's why more and more people are looking at them, because it is a huge business now in our state, since they changed the taxation of rental property below a fiveplex.
Okay, so Ken, if you'll go ahead and look that up for us, and we'll take this back up after we get those numbers and see if we can even pull something together like that. Okay. Moving on to the next item, which is the fireworks and beer sales, to waive the requirements. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, Mr. Harrington's here to speak on behalf of the Fair Committee.
Good evening. Seems like every time I come here, I'm asking for fireworks. I'm here on behalf of the Fair Committee to ask that you change the ordinance about fireworks. We're going to have a fireworks show on Saturday night at the fair, starting at 9 o'clock. We are going to have it much larger than it was last year, and so it was a really good crowd favorite last year. A lot of great comments about it. So we'd like to ask that you do waive or change that ordinance for that particular event, and then also we will be having the beer garden as well at the fair starting Friday. We're going to start it a little earlier this year because of the Dana and Park show. We'll be starting at 2 o'clock. They have a large crowd that comes with them, and so supposedly they're going to fill the entire pavilion with people. That's what they said they would do. So we're going to provide refreshments for those people, and starting at 2 o'clock on Friday, and then we will go till, I believe, 11 or 12 on Saturday. So just asking for permission to do that as well. So, any questions?
You just want permission to have fireworks that day?
On Saturday night for 9 o'clock to have a fireworks show, and then permission to sell, have the beer garden on city property on Friday.
Okay.
You need a motion?
Yeah, I need a motion. Have a motion from Alderman. What's your name? Get a second.
I'll second that.
I second it.
Okay, I got a second from Alderman Totten. All those in favor of waiving the requirements signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you. So you got it good. Moving on to our public hearing. The next item is the public hearing for the voluntary annexation by Mr. Larkin. I'll open up the public hearing for public input. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close. I'm sorry?
Just have Ken do a quick introduction on that.
Yeah, I can give you an overview here, but this is the land directly north of the existing Greystone subdivision. So if you've ever been into Greystone, you turn in that main road, you go past the fourplexes on the the north side of the road and you make that first left, there's a road that dead ends. This would be the parcel that you run into there. It's about 20 acres. It does not go all the way to Duncan Road. If you look at the aerial that was attached there, it's just that rectangle shape there. Well, the city did receive a voluntary annexation request from Justin Larkin to bring that 20 acres north of Greystone into the corporate limits. Like I said, the idea that he's looking at now is the majority of it being single family with the possibility of commercial along Buckner Tarzany if that were to go. And if you remember, we just did this here a month or so ago, but just to remind you of the process, once we receive that request, we send out notices of the public hearing. We hold the public hearing, and then there's a 14-day period after that to receive any comments. And then after that point, we can go forward with the reads to actually approve the annexation. And then after that is the establishment of zoning for the property. So right now, it's just public hearing to bring the property in. This isn't zoning at this time.
Okay, any discussion at this point? Okay, see if there's no further comments, go ahead and close this portion of the public hearing. And can I ask you to go ahead and introduce the establishing of the, did you just talk about the establishing zoning of Mr. Sousley?
Two separate things, two separate hearings.
Very good. Will you go ahead and introduce that for me then, please?
Yep, the next item is establishing the zoning for another property that was recently voluntarily annexed into the city. This is that property that's north of Duncan Road, in between Rust and the existing Rosewood subdivision. If you remember when we went through that, the R1 single family was what was being proposed there. This is just the administrative side of actually going forward with that. This would establish R1 single family as the zoning for that entire parcel. So again, we had to send out public notice for that and do the public hearing. It's a little different because we'll actually have the first read for that tonight. But for that parcel, we already had the public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission where it was approved, and we had the preliminary plat that also went through with that. So it's in line with what was originally proposed when we did the annexation. This is just a requirement by statute.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead on this item and open up the hearing for, the public hearing for establishing zoning for Mr. Sousley and Mr. Yancik for public input.
Can I bring something up here real quick? It looks like in our packet we have the same aerial for both hearings. Is that correct?
If you do, that was a mistake. This would have been the same one that you would have gotten. Well, at least in my packet, I've got the right. It's a rectangle, which is really similar.
You had mentioned, the only reason I'm asking is you had mentioned business on
that was for the annexation. That was the first public hearing.
You were butting it up against, you mentioned Buckner Tarzany.
For the annexation. If I said that for this, I misspoke. It's between Rust and the Rosewood subdivision for the zoning.
There's a gap. There's a big property gap between Buckner Tarzany and this property.
Yeah, if I said Buckner Tarzany, that was a mistake, yeah.
Nope, never mind.
That would have been for the zoning part, or for the annexation part.
Wanted to make sure I was looking at the right.
Yeah, this is the property that about a month ago was annexed in.
Okay, if there's no further comments, I will close the public hearing. And the public hearing is now closed. So we will move on to the ordinances.
Ordinance B 1714, an ordinance establishing the zoning for certain land in Green Valley as R1 single family for Logan Sousley and Larry Yancik.
Mayor, I move that we accept B 17-14 as read and bring it back for second reading by title only.
Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Arnold to, bring forth the ordinance B 17-14 as read. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Headley. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, this is what Mr. Murphy just referred to in the most recent public hearing. Any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Okay. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0 first. See, he can vote.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
6-0.
Say aye.
Bill R. or
Resolution. Nice, already.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Moving on to resolution.
This is, bill number R 17-32, a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Green Valley authorizing the use of Jackson County 2017 pavement maintenance phase 1-4 contract for the city's 2017, street maintenance.
I move that we accept resolution number R 17-32 as read.
I have a motion to bring forth a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Green Valley authorizing the use of Jackson County's 2017 pavement maintenance phase 1-4 contract for the city's 2017 street maintenance by Alderman Totten. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
6-0.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the city attorney's report.
No report.
Okay. Moving on to city administrator and staff reports.
And we'll start with Mr. Murphy.
So it's nothing specific, but I just did want to bring to your attention that we have been seeing an increase in communication back and forth with the public, with Sarah Netto, or PIO. She had sent out a couple of notices here about a month ago, but it was kind of just letting people know all the different ways to get a hold of the city, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, email, phone, and that has seemed that we've seen an increase in calls. And it's not necessarily negative. It could just be wanting an answer to something or just making a comment, and that's PD side, that could be parks, that could be city, and she's done a good job of replying back to people. So just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention. That it does seem like that communication is increasing. She's doing a good job with that.
Mr. Davies?
Mayor, Board of Aldermen, just a few things. One is we've opened registration for youth baseball and softball. It would have been about 4 weeks ago for the fall season. That registration deadline concluded this past Friday, and we are in the process of having our coaches meetings throughout this week. So we're looking to kick off the fall baseball and softball season, and it will run through the end of October. Lastly, we put pool management services out for bid a month or so ago, and August 3rd was the bid deadline. We received 2 bids in total. One was from Midwest Pool Management, the other one was from United Pools. We are in the process of evaluating those bids, but hope to have some direction on which contractor we'll plan on going with here shortly.
Just wanted to give everybody an update on our 4-way stop intersection studies. We would have had that done for this meeting. Unfortunately, on Montana Ridge and Hillsborough, somebody stole one of our counters, which is pretty significant. Those are like $1,300 a piece. So we'll have that study done for the next meeting. But as of right now, we have the other 2 intersections completed. So.
Did ask Rick to wait until we got that final one completed to report out on everything. Like I said, when they steal the counter. It's difficult to complete the traffic survey, so. Ms. Bowden?
I just want to let the mayor and board of aldermen know that we've had a lot of requests for customers wanting their water bill emailed to them. We've been kind of testing it with some of the city employees, and we're going to include a form in the September bills offering that to people if they want their water bill emailed to send it out to them.
Hoping that we'll have good results with this. I know personally I do all of my bills via bill pay, and Comcast, KCP, and a lot of my bills actually come through email, so I don't get the paper statement. It'll reduce our postage amount and printing quite a bit if we're able to do that. Plus, we can include same type of flyers, same type of marketing information via email. It's just taking it away from United States Postal Service and putting it back in our coffers, so. You're not.
They'll have the option, they can, on the form, there'll be an option, they can still get a paper bill mailed to them.
Great idea.
All right, Chief Starbuck.
As you know, the first week of August, the city hosted the National Biker Roundup, and we had excellent assistance from a variety of our sister law enforcement agencies and CJC and everyone else we could get our hands on. All in all, it went very well from a law enforcement perspective. We had no major incidents. Myself and several others spent a lot of time on the grounds, touring around, and the crowds themselves were extremely well behaved. No problems between the interaction between law enforcement and the attendees. We had a few minor incidents, but nothing of a serious or dangerous nature during the 3 days that people were coming into town. All total, we handled 3 very minor motor vehicle accidents, 1 on the grounds, 2 were rally members on the way to the grounds. There was 1 theft of a motorcycle from a rally attendee that was stolen on the grounds. And there were 4 calls on medical emergencies, none of them too serious, that fire and ambulance responded on, handled quickly. We had we took reports on 5 break-ins of parked cars, and all of them were cars belonging to people that were had parked them outside the rally area. 2 were in the parking lot of the post office down here on Main Street, and 3 were parked in front of the Green Valley Market down on Eagles. And the windows were broken, and unfortunately the 2 cars in the parking lot of the post office, both of them left loaded firearms inside, so those are now floating around. But that was the only crimes. There was 1 incident reported. There was some counterfeit money that was being used going into the rally, and that was turned over to police. No suspect developed. And all in all, we had no major problems, other than Friday night was a horrendous traffic snafu. And the rally organizers had told us earlier in the day that because of the heavy rains that were expected Saturday morning, they had already planned to announce to people they were shutting it down at midnight. That was causing some animosity because a lot of rally people were just arriving in town, and by the time they got in there, they were trying to collect their admission fee at the gate and then telling them it was all over at midnight. So the traffic jam itself, the biggest part of it was from about 7:30 p.m. up until about 11, and the rally itself with the entertainment at the stage was very well behaved. I did make my way down to Main Street and finally told Highway Patrol we shut off Old 40 Highway. I said, you've got too many people coming there. It was going to pose a danger if we'd have had an emergency to get any large vehicles back there. and we let the traffic clear up, and eventually the problem resolved itself. And about 11:15, the music ended, and a lot of people left town. Early the next morning, the organizers were down there pounding on trailers and RVs, telling them to get out because the water was rising quickly down there. So no incidents regarding the weather. Most people got out.
Any questions for Chief Starbuck?
Chief, do you have an estimate how many people?
No, actually, they still have not given me their estimates of people. That was a difficult terrain for us to really make an estimate. Now, if you haven't seen it, Mr. Hunt, we did the last night on Friday. The Sheriff Sharp with Jackson County was down wandering around with me, and they brought their drone over, and we sent it up, and they took an excellent about 2-minute video where I said I would like to see, and it gives you, I was actually stunned when I saw how many vehicles and people were packed in there, and I was glad we got them all out safely. There easily were, it was kind of a fluid in and out. It's not, because a lot of people were coming in, they were staying as far as Olathe, Kansas, so they'd come out there for periods of the time and then go out. So I know I'm certain we had, at any given time, 8,000 to 10,000 people down there. We've gotten some good feedback, and I was very proud of the law enforcement community, especially in this difficult time in our country right now. But we got a lot of positive feedback on the employees and the officers and so forth. They spent a lot of time interacting with people, which I thought spoke well for them, handling a large crowd like that. I have noted on the Facebook pages of the rally itself, the comments, and they're slanted towards the organizers, where a lot of people were not very pleased. And I think it was pretty obvious they learned by the second day that event, this venue out here is completely not able to, the numbers they packed. This was nothing, the numbers they had were way farther than the last time they were here in 20 years ago, yeah. And a lot of them, I talked to a lot of them that had been there, and they said, yeah, it just wasn't working well back there. So they were a little bit more upset with some of the organization of that.
Thank you.
All right, I've just got 2 quick things. First, September 11th is the first meeting scheduled for the month of September. Unfortunately, Teresa and Kalila, which our city clerk and deputy city clerk, will be out of town for annual training that they attend for continuing education credits. In addition, we will have some other staff members gone. So after speaking with Mayor Todd about that, he wanted me to bring it up this evening. We need to at least reschedule, if not just cancel that meeting. I know that he was okay with canceling it just because that's going to be coming off the fair weekend. It's going to be a tremendously busy week. The only problem with going with September 4th is that's going to be the kickoff of when we're trying to prepare for the fair. So really our options are we either cancel September 11th and just go to September 25th, which is the second board meeting, or we could do a September 18th board meeting and a September 25th board meeting. That's kind of difficult doing back-to-back agendas because we're sending one agenda out the day of the first meeting. So I thought I'd bring it up for discussion, at least to find out what the board's thoughts are about skipping it, or whether we would have half of the department head team out of town and nobody to actually take minutes. So thoughts, suggestions, anyone?
Skip it.
Skip it? Okay.
I said skip it.
All right, so with that, then we will cancel the September 11th meeting. We'll publish that on Facebook, Teresa, would you make sure that you get with Sarah about that, make sure that the public is notified?
Does that put you in a bind budget-wise or anything like that?
No, we have,
Saving money.
the budget is actually gonna be going out, you'll be receiving the budget, on September 18th, which is, it's an off week, but I'm gonna deliver the budget workbooks on Monday, September 18th. That'll give you 2 weeks to review them, and at the next board meeting, so on the 28th, we're gonna go ahead and schedule this year's, budget workshops. So I'm gonna come back with dates. We'll probably try to get through the entire budget in 2 to 3 workshops as typical, but if we need more, we can do that. If we get through it sooner, we can do that too, but I'd like to start the workshops the very first week of October. That way we can have the budget wrapped up by the 3rd week of October and have, the second read done by the end of November. That'll give us, a month between the new fiscal year, the approval and the new fiscal year, so that'll give us ample amount of time. And December's always a hard.
September the 28th?
September the 18th is when you'll actually get the budget, when the board will receive the budget. So other than that, no, shouldn't put any bind on budget. The last thing that I had,
Will we be able to have the first reading of the tax levy next meeting, because we'll need 2 readings of that by September 28th?
we can talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know
It's
why we
scheduled, I thought it was scheduled for the first
The
reading.
hearing is, we usually have the first read after that, but you can have the first read on the same night as the hearing.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were gonna do with it.
That's what I thought we were gonna do, but I just wanted to make sure we were on that.
Yeah. So we would have the first read of
On the
the
28th of
levy
August.
hearing on the 28th.
Right,
Right.
okay. Wanted to make sure that was planned.
And then the last item that I have is, you see on, in your places when you came in, the, July, Board of Aldermen report. You'll actually get this via email too, and it's, included, it'll be included in, I try to typically include these in your e-packet. I didn't get it in, this time, so it will be part of the meeting minutes though, for Teresa. So please go through that. We had a good month, saw significant, increases in, police department activities over the last month. It must be just something in the air, but we had a tremendous amount of, I mean, they did a great job with, business checks. The first thing that caught my eye as I was going through the report, was that we typically do about 100 to 200 business checks. Last month they did 1,300 business checks, so that's actually, you know, they got out of their car, went up, shook a door, checked, walked around it, looked, great job with that. And then not that we can measure success by, tickets or GOSs issued, but we did, see, that those numbers double over the last month as well. About 100 or 200% increase in that, so, take time to read this. I know it's a long report, but it's got all the information that you would ever wanna know about the month of July. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay. Moving on to Board of Aldermen reports.
Jeff, if I may, before we, I have a question pertaining, just not having gone through this budget process. One thing that would be helpful, not to have copies of the last 5 years' budget detail, but is it possible, and maybe it's normally provided as part of the background that's included in the process, but would it be possible to see the last 3 to 5 years rolled up totals for
Yes.
each, we'll call it?
It'll be part of your
part of the
packet.
process?
Yeah, so what your packet will include the proposed budget, and it's several different columns, and it'll include the proposed budget. It goes back, is it 3 or 4 years?
We'll have 2 prior years, the current year, year-to-date, and the proposed budget.
Yeah, so you have three years previous to the proposed, basically.
Worth of history to look at. Okay.
And of course, we can provide those reports as far back as you would like, if there's anything specifically you wanna see, but that's the standard that you'll get, so.
3 years. Great. Thank you.
Okay. On the Board of Aldermen reports and comments, Alderman Arnold,
Nothing to report.
Alderman Bammon,
Nothing to report.
and I have nothing to report at this time. Alderman Headley.
I just wanted to say thanks to Rick and Ken and Shannon for responding to the calls and emails we got concerning the waterway out on Green Drive. Just the lady that talked to us was very happy with the response, and I actually was late getting back to her because I had a tough day that day, and I had an email half typed. Apologized to her after the fact, but appreciate your all quick response on that.
Okay, Alderman Totten.
No, I'd just like to say thank you to all the lovely people that are paying attention right now in my area. It's helping me out a whole lot.
Okay, thank you. Alderman West.
Just one note, we were actually in that line of traffic on Friday night. It was a scene to behold. Cars were moving about an inch an hour, but it was quite impressive, actually. We were coming from the movie theater at the wrong time, right around 9 o'clock, 9 to 9:30. And could not believe.
They were having a large concert at Plainville.
Yes, they did.
Town, and we also had a live radio station that was broadcasting at the Riley site all afternoon, telling everyone, come out to Green Valley tonight and see the movie. The Riley side of the red show at 7:30. And at one point, it was completely gridlocked all the way from the Raleigh side to Main Street here and as far back as Adams Ferry. And highway patrol and everybody was trying to bring that on the same shut it all down.
It was impressive.
I'm not sure that's the word.
No. There were other words being said, but we were impressed.
All right, thank you. And Mayor Todd is not here, so we will move past his report. And there is no need for executive session this evening. So unless there's any further discussion, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.